you to this our second webinar for this week here that features discussion on the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy. Last night, we met with our Guyanese diaspora in New York and New Jersey, and tonight we are meeting with the Guyanese diaspora in the United Kingdom. Additionally, we have Guyanese joining us from various countries out of Europe. So we're very happy that our embassy in Brussels were able to do us a courtesy of an extended invitation to Guyanese from different countries in Europe. So welcome to each and every one of you. As you are aware, the Guyana is currently facing a serious matter where Venezuela is once again rearing its head to make claims on 3/4 of the country. And from what we've been hearing in our engagements with our Guyanese diaspora, there've been lots of concerns as to what is really happening. We are aware that there are lots of inaccuracies floated out in the public domain on social media, and it causes us to be very cautious with respect to the sources that we're getting our information. So tonight we wanted to bring to you two key officials, members of government, that will bring to you the accurate information as it relates to the Guyana-Venezuela border dispute. We're going to hear from both ministers, and then we will open up for some questions and answers. You'll have an opportunity to actually ask the ministers directly any concerns. So again, we wanted to bring this information to you so that you can hear for yourself what is really happening as it relates to the controversy. Our first speaker for this evening is none other but the Minister of Health, the Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony. Dr. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rosalinda, and good evening to everyone who has joined the call. It's a pleasure to be here with you. A pleasant good afternoon also to my colleague, Dr. Ashni Singh, who is sharing the panel with me. I think one of the easiest way for us to perhaps start this engagement is maybe to give you a little background on this whole thing that is happening with Venezuela. Maybe some of you have the in-depth knowledge of this controversy, and maybe others, you've heard about it, but have never really gone through in depth. So I want to use the very first couple of minutes to perhaps talk a little bit about that. And then I'm sure Ashni would add, and then maybe we can open it up for a discussion. So you know that in 1899, there was an arbitral award. But leading up to that arbitral award, if you go back a little bit earlier, in 1831, that's when the colony of Essequibo, Demerara, and Berbice was brought together by the British and was called British Guyana. After that happened, one of the things that the British did was then to try to decide on the boundaries of British Guyana. And so they then got a surveyor, Robert Schomburg, to come in and to survey the boundaries of British Guyana. So the first set of surveys that were done between 1835 and 1839. And he did 3 expeditions. And then he went back in 1841 to 1844 and did 5 expeditions. And these were mostly in the western part of Guyana. And in 1844, one of the things that he did was to establish what was then called the Schomburg Line. And the Schomburg Line was basically on the eastern bank of the Orinoco. And that's where he decided that it was the boundary between the two countries. Obviously, when the Venezuelans were not too happy about this, and so they started saying that they need to have a negotiation and where the western boundary is located. we have evidence to show that this area was in occupation by the Dutch. And when the British took over, rightfully, the area should have come to Great Britain. So there's a lot of evidence that is available. You have the Kaikoverall, you have settlements that were in the Pomeroon and even a little bit further. All of these were Dutch settlements, and the Dutch, some of whom were thrown out of Brazil, came and settled in and around the Pomeroon area and stretched all the way up to the Orinoco. So the Dutch were in occupation, and when the English took over, this area rightfully belonged to the English, and Schomburg surveyed it and claimed it for England. Venezuela then, having failed to get negotiations going between Great Britain and themselves, asked the United States to intervene. And President Cleveland actually started out by naming a boundary commission, and that forced Britain to arbitration. And in 1887, one of the things that were done was the Treaty of Washington, which then paved the way for an arbitral process. And so that arbitration happened in 1899. And as part of the Treaty of 1887, what was clearly spelled out in the treaty was, once the arbitration was completed, that the settlement would be full, perfect, and a final settlement, meaning that you can't go and reopen it, you can't go and question it, and that sort of thing. So you had the arbitration happen, a boundary was decided upon, and when that boundary was decided upon, Venezuela accepted the boundary. And between 1900 and 1905, we had a mixed commission comprising of people from Venezuela and British Guyana going and surveying the boundaries to make sure that it was in compliance with the arbitral award. They started at a point called Point Playa, and they went all the way to the Tri-Point Junction. And it took them 5 years to be able to complete this. And then in 1905, both parties signed off on this as the final boundary. And those maps and signature and everything is available. Venezuela, by all the maps, official maps and everything that they've issued between 1905 to 1962, acknowledged that this was our boundary. But as we were going into independence in the 60s, they started reopening or tried to reopen this whole claim that, you know, whatever happened in 1899, that there was some conspiracy and they needed to relook at it and that sort of thing. So they started creating doubts. The British agreed that they can peruse archival records. So they can come to the UK, look at archival records, and the UK people can go to Venezuela to look at the archival records to see whether or not there was any conspiracy. Of course, there was none to be found, but Venezuela started holding on to this process, and we then had to sign that Geneva Agreement, which allowed for these discussions. Now, to be extremely clear, Venezuela is claiming that there's a controversy. In the minds of Guyana, it is very clear that 1899 arbitral award was final. We don't have a controversy at the border. In our minds, that has been demarcated, and it's very clear to us. So we enter into a process where we had, for the first year, a mixed commission that talked about this. You had Guyana, you had Venezuela. Nothing of substance came out of that discussion. Then they decided to hold this in abeyance for another 12 years. And then we enter into a good officers process that lasted for about 28 years. We decided this is not going anywhere, and we have asked the courts, that is the International Court of Justice, to make a ruling. And when we approached the UN Secretary General on this matter, one of the things that he said, give it another year, and if there's no resolution, then we will choose an option. We gave it another year, that's between 2017 and 2018. Nothing was resolved, and so we put the matter before the ICJ. The matter is currently before the ICJ. When the matter went there, one of the things that happened is that Venezuela claimed that the ICJ does not have jurisdiction. And so the ICJ was at pains to invite them to make their arguments and all of that so that due process was followed. And then having considered all the arguments that Venezuela and Guyana made, they ruled that they do have jurisdiction. So that court process is continuing, and they would have a chance to come and lay whatever evidence they have to claim that there's a conspiracy and they want to undo this 1899 award. They'll have a chance to do that. But in all these years, from 1966 to now, they have not been able to produce a shred of evidence to show that this thing should be nullified. So while this court process is happening, Venezuela then decided that they're going to have a referendum. And so on the 3rd, they said to their people, we want you to come out and vote for 5 questions, among which is that you don't recognize the 1899 award and that the Guyana Essequibo belongs to Venezuela and that they should issue ID cards and so forth for the people living in that region. Of course, this is a travesty because they don't control the area. They have no right to be able to go to their electorate to impose these sort of things on Guyana. And we have rightfully gone back to the ICJ and said to them, these guys are questioning your authority. You have already ruled that you have authority, and these guys are now going ahead with a referendum. We can't stop them from having a referendum, but the questions that they have, that's what we are concerned about because that affects us as Guyanese. And so we have asked the court to make some preliminary rulings, and that is going to happen on Friday. So that's just to sum up the background of where we are and what is going on. Okay, I'll probably turn it over to Ashni so that Ashni can continue.
Right. Thank you so much, Minister. We appreciate that introduction as well as the historical context to the controversy. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh, who is the Senior Minister within the Office of the President with responsibility for finance. Dr. Ashni Singh, the floor is all yours.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rosalinda. And thank you very much to Minister Frank Anthony, my colleague in the cabinet. And most of all, of course, thank you very much to my dear Guyanese brothers and sisters living in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, if anybody else has joined this online meeting. Over the years, the Guyanese diaspora around the world has remained closely connected with their homeland, and on multiple occasions throughout the history of our country have played an extremely important role in advancing Guyana's interests. And it's against this background that we thought it important to ensure that the diaspora is fully informed on this matter, that the diaspora has an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have, clarify any doubts that you might have, and ensure that you're fully informed on the matter. I will not repeat any of the historic account that was just presented by my colleague Frank. I think Frank provided a very informative and comprehensive account of the history, the background, the entire history indeed, of how we got to where we are. Suffice it to say that, as was demonstrated abundantly by Frank's presentation to you, Guyana is on extremely strong and indeed unshakable, unchallengeable, and unquestionable ground in relation to the fact that Essequibo, and I use the word fact very deliberately in relation to the fact that Essequibo is a part of Guyana and has been since time immemorial, and certainly has been since the 1899 arbitral award, which was agreed to be a full, final, and perfect settlement. Building on Frank's historic account, I would like to make perhaps just 2 or 3 very simple points. The first is that Guyana is not alone in our view that Essequibo is a part of Guyana. We are not operating in an environment or in a situation here where this is a view held by Guyana only. Over the years, Guyana has had extremely strong regional and hemispheric and indeed global solidarity and support on this matter. And most recently, in light of the most recent agitations and machinations by the Venezuelans, a number of regional, hemispheric, and global or multilateral organizations have come out and spoke out emphatically against Venezuela's aggressive behavior, aggressive and indeed unlawful behavior in violation of Guyana's territorial integrity. In fact, if I may, I would like to share with you a few statements that were made by international organizations and groups and blocks of nations that you will very easily and immediately recognize. You would know that the Organization of American States is a very important hemispheric organization comprising the sovereign states of the American continent, from the North America through Central America and down to South America. The OAS has consistently over the years pronounced on this matter. And most recently, on September the 23rd of 2023. Well, in fact, let me go back. You would recall that on September the 21st, 2023, Venezuela's National Assembly took the decision to engage in a national consultation on this question of Venezuela, of Essequibo. Very swiftly, on the 23rd of September 2023, the Organization of American States, the General Secretariat of the OAS, issued the following statement, and I will read it for you. It reads as follows, and I quote, "On September 21st, 2023, the regime of Venezuela's National Assembly unanimously agreed to call a national public consultation so that the people strengthen the defense and the inalienable rights of Venezuela over the territorial dispute with Guyana. We condemn this improper use of a referendum because it is illegal according to the 1966 Geneva Agreement, and because similar misuses of this instrument have served as a pretext in the past to try to justify the worst actions by states, including the crime of aggression. The General Secretariat of the Organization of American States reiterates that Venezuela and Guyana share the responsibility of resolving their dispute in the spirit of good neighborliness and in accordance with international law and the Geneva Agreement to seek peaceful solutions to the territorial dispute. Furthermore, the OAS General Secretariat continues to support the Cooperative Republic of Guyana's sovereign right to practice its franchise on its established and pertinent maritime area in accordance with international law and the principles of the United Nations. The OAS Secretariat objects to Venezuela's encroachment on Guyana's sovereignty and territorial rights through intimidatory and unfounded statements that fail to respect international conventions and the 1899 arbitral award, for which the latter is presently under judicial review at the International Court of Justice. I believe that language coming from the OAS is extremely clear, and the only qualifier that I would add to that language is that we in Guyana have consistently taken the position that there isn't a dispute in this matter, that in fact the border has been settled since 1899, and Venezuela has sought to bring that settlement into controversy. But otherwise, I believe the OAS language is crystal clear and self-explanatory. On the 25th of October 2023, CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, issued a statement with the unanimous support of CARICOM heads of government. And I'm going to read that statement. The Caribbean Community notes the decision of the Venezuelan National Assembly to conduct a popular referendum on defending Venezuela's claim on Essequibo. CARICOM further notes that 2 of the questions approved to be posed in the referendum, if answered in the affirmative, would authorize the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Essequibo to embark on the annexation of territory which constitutes part of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and to create a state within Venezuela known as Guyana-Essequibo. CARICOM reaffirms that international law strictly prohibits the government of one state from unilaterally seizing, annexing, or incorporating the territory of another state. An affirmative vote, as aforesaid, opens the door to the possible violation of this fundamental tenet of international law. It is to be emphasized that the land and water in question, the Essequibo region of Guyana, comprises more than 2/3 of the whole of Guyana itself. CARICOM notes the language of 2 questions approved to be posed in the referendum seeks an affirmation and implementation of Venezuela's stance on the issue, in quotes, by all means according to with the law. It is open to reasonable persons to conclude that by all means includes the force of war. CARICOM earnestly hopes that Venezuela is not raising the prospect of using force or military means to get its own way in this controversy over territory. After all, it has been the long-standing position of Latin American Caribbean countries, including Venezuela, that our region must remain a zone of peace. Meanwhile, CARICOM insists that the referendum proposed by Venezuela has no validity, bearing, or standing in international law in relation to this controversy. The referendum is a purely domestic construct, but its summary effect is likely to undermine peace, tranquility, security, and more in our region. CARICOM reiterates its support for the judicial process and expresses the hope that Venezuela will engage fully in that process before the International Court of Justice, which has determined that it has the jurisdiction in the case brought before it to determine the validity of the 1899 arbitral award, which Venezuela questions. The court's final decision will ensure a resolution that is peaceful, equitable, and in accordance with international law. There are also statements that have been made. The Commonwealth Secretary General has also issued a statement. In fact, on the 1st of November 2023, the Commonwealth Secretary General issued the following statement, and I will read. The Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, King's Counsel, has expressed deep concern at the 21 September decision of the Venezuelan National Assembly to undertake a referendum on the status of the Essequibo region, part of the sovereign territory of the government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Speaking on the escalation, the Secretary General said, "The Commonwealth stands with the government and people of Guyana and with our partners in CARICOM in expressing our concern over the questions in the planned referendum. And the Commonwealth continues to stand for the rule of law and reaffirms its firm and steadfast support for the maintenance and preservation of the sovereign and territorial integrity of Guyana and the unobstructed exercise of its rights to develop the entirety of its territory for the benefit of its people. The 5 questions approved by the National Electoral Council to be included in the referendum undermine Guyana's territorial integrity and sovereignty, and their intent is contrary to international law. Question 5 proposes the creation of the Venezuelan state of Guyana-Essequibo and is an accelerated plan for giving Venezuelan citizenship and identity cards to the Guyanese population. International law prohibits the seizure and annexation by one country of the territory of another. The language in these questions contributes to heightened tension and is a threat to peace and stability in a member state of our Commonwealth family, and indeed in the wider Caribbean region. At the last meeting of the Commonwealth Ministerial Group on Guyana, held on 17 September 2023, the group reaffirmed its unwavering support for the judicial process underway before the International Court of Justice, chosen by the Secretary General of the United Nations under the 1966 Geneva Agreement, and the group continues to encourage Venezuela to participate in said process. The International Court of Justice determined in April of this year that it had legal jurisdiction of this long-standing issue, and the Commonwealth supports the use of the ICJ to adjudicate on the matter. The referendum goes against the spirit of peaceful dispute resolution. I shared those statements. I took the time to read, in fact, those statements by CARICOM, by the Commonwealth, and by the Organization of American States to reiterate the point that Guyana does not stand alone in this matter, and that the international community has not only in recent times, but has consistently taken a position that is condemnatory of Venezuela's tactics of aggression and intimidation, instead of, in the first instance, respecting the 1899, the legally binding 1899 arbitral award, which both parties recognized to be a full, final, and perfect settlement. And most recently, in light of the escalation of tensions or the escalation of intimidatory and aggressive postures being assumed by Venezuela, the international community has continued to speak out in condemnation of the behaviors that are being observed on the Venezuelan side. Secondly, in addition to the strong international solidarity that Guyana has consistently enjoyed on this matter, it is important, I feel it is important for me to emphasize the following. If you consider the history that Frank just shared with you, you will note that Guyana has been endeavoring through peaceful and diplomatic means, and through means stipulated by and in accordance with international law, Guyana has been endeavoring to bring a resolution, a definitive resolution to this controversy initiated by Venezuela for a number of years. And indeed, over the tenures of successive governments. In fact, the question of Guyana's territorial integrity is a question on which there is political unanimity in Guyana. Successive governments, whether we speak of the PNC government from 1968 until 1992, whether we speak of the People's Progressive Party government from 1992 to 2015, whether we speak of the APNU government from 2015 to 2020, and whether we speak of the People's Progressive Party government from 2020 onwards, there has been a consistent and unanimous position in Guyana around Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is one of the very few matters, if I might say so, on which there is political unanimity across the entire political spectrum in Guyana. The major political parties in Guyana are at one in relation to this matter. And in fact, in that regard, I draw your attention to two things. And the first is a joint statement issued by His Excellency, the President of Guyana, Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, and the Honorable Mr. Aubrey Norton, Leader of the Opposition, issued on the 25th of October 2023. And it's a statement in which the President and the opposition leader spoke with a single voice after a meeting they held on October 24th, accompanied by their respective teams, and they came together and reiterated Guyana's sovereignty over Essequibo and reiterated the unanimous position in relation to the fact that Essequibo forms a part of Guyana's sovereign territory. Additionally, the National Assembly of Guyana met on the 6th of November 2023 and debated a motion once again on the same subject and approved that motion unanimously, as a result of which the Parliament issued a resolution with unanimous support, that is to say, support across both sides of the House, in which, amongst other things, the National Assembly of Guyana affirmed the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, reaffirmed its recognition and acceptance of the 1899 arbitral award as a full, perfect, and final settlement of the boundary between Guyana and Venezuela, denounced as provocative, unlawful, void, and of no international legal effect the purported referendum in Venezuela that is scheduled for December 3rd, 2023, supported the government in its pursuit to ensure a peaceful and lawful resolution of the controversy before the International Court of Justice, and rejected the proposal to return to any form of dialogue with Venezuela on the controversy outside of the process before the court, etc., including, of course, encouraging the citizens of Guyana to remain fully engaged on developments supporting the controversy, and expressing the appreciation of the National Assembly to the partners and friends of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana for their support and expressions of affirmation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Guyana. And I make these points really to say the following, that this is an issue on which Guyana is completely and fully unified, irrespective of political orientation, irrespective of which government is in office. There has been a consistent position taken by successive governments and the respective oppositions at the time throughout independent Guyana's history in relation to Guyana's sovereignty over Essequibo. This is a matter on which there is full and complete political unanimity in Guyana. And secondly, I wanted to emphasize, really to make the point that this is not just Guyana's interpretation of the 1899 award. This is not just Guyana's interpretation of international law. The international community and several hemispheric institutions have consistently taken a position in relation to this matter. Every single statement emanating from the annual CARICOM Heads of Government meeting, and every single statement emanating from the Commonwealth, the annual Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference, every single statement coming out of those organizations, those multilateral organizations, has included a statement in relation, reaffirming recognition for Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So this is a position on which there's very strong international support. We continue to enjoy very strong international support, and Guyana's position is very simple. We don't believe that there is any, in fact, we don't believe with very strong basis that there's any legitimate question in relation to our border with Venezuela. We have a binding arbitral award. We were prepared and we were prepared throughout the years to have a peaceful diplomatic resolution of the controversy initiated and manufactured by Venezuela. We remain fully committed to the principles of peace and of respect for the rule of international law. And having taken the matter to the International Court of Justice, we are confident that we have a very strong basis on which to expect a favorable and definitive ruling, and we reject completely the provocative, preemptive, and hostile actions currently being taken and pronouncements currently being made by our neighbors to the west, Venezuela. I'm going to stop there, and of course, we would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Ashni Singh, for very comprehensive insight into what the position is globally as it relates to the controversy. And of course, for our audience here, you would have heard, again, the context or the historical context of the controversy. So it puts everything into picture there for you. At this juncture, we're going to open the floor for any questions that you may have. And feel free to ask them of the ministers. There's a raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Please use that. For those who want to ask a question, please go ahead and press that button so we can identify who those persons are that want to ask a question. For those who may be shy and not want to ask those questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to read those questions out to our two panelists. And at the same time, I'd like to encourage all of you that's on the call to put your contact details, name and contact details, a number and an email, so we can keep you on our database and share with you updates and other information, and to keep you updated of some of our upcoming activities. So whilst we're doing this, you can put your information here. So we have one hand up. I've already seen a question or two in the chat box. So let's start with Ali. First person that you can unmute and ask your question, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Minister Anthony and Singh, for a preview as to what is currently taking place. My question is, given the historic context, how engaged is Britain in the current situation, and how supportive are they towards Guyana? And Minister Singh, you mentioned that Guyana was committed to a peaceful resolution with Venezuela. What does a peaceful resolution look like? Thank you.
Shall we take a number of questions and then come back to them, or how do you propose to do this?
I think we can do them one-on-one, just so we.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I will perhaps take the second question, and then Frank can take the first. Alim, you asked, what does a peaceful resolution look like? Where we are currently, a peaceful resolution will comprise a ruling by the International Court of Justice on the substantive matter that is before it. So of course, there are the provisional measures that we have applied for in relation to the referendum. We anticipate a decision in that regard on Friday, but there is of course the substantive matter that we took in relation to the reaffirmation of the recognition of the 1899 award. A peaceful resolution will comprise the ICJ completing its hearing and consideration of this matter with full participation by the two parties, and the two parties respecting the ruling that is eventually handed down by the ICJ.
Thank you.
Ms. Santi, you want to add to that before we move on?
No, I think for the first one, the UK's role, we have received statements of support from the UK as well, and a number of UK organizations. I think the only country that has supported Venezuela is Nicaragua. So we have unanimous support from, a lot of countries, the Commonwealth, the UK, the EU, a number of countries. So I think, as Ashni would have explained, we are on the right track, and we are committed to that peaceful resolution.
Thank you very much. I see Mr. Chris Nutt, hand is up. You're muted, Mr. Chris. Mr. Chris, you have to press the mute button, correct? To unmute yourself. There you go.
Yes, we've heard from the minister's reactions from friendlier countries, if I can call the UK, North America, and the Commonwealth countries. I just wondered whether they had any reactions from the neighboring South American countries.
Shall I take that?
Yes, go right ahead, Minister.
Sure. So let me just say that in addition to bilateral expressions of support, you would have seen, in fact, and you know that we have a very close engagement with Brazil, who of course have an interest in this matter because Brazil is a party to border agreements that recognize the tri-junction point between Guyana, Venezuela, and Brazil. And in fact, it's worthwhile to note that that border agreement with Venezuela was concluded in 1927 or 28, if I'm not mistaken. Venezuela, having received the 1899 award, concluded a border agreement with Brazil that recognizes the tri-junction point on the border with Guyana, where Guyana, Venezuela, and Brazil meet. And so there is a point at which these three countries meet. And of course, Brazil is a country with whom we have extremely strong relations. But I don't want to get drawn into a discussion, for obvious reasons, on bilateral pronouncements that have been made between, or discussions that have been had between Guyana and any particular country, except to say that there's a reason why I read out the OAS statement, because the OAS statement comprises the states of the Americas. The OAS is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and comprises all of the states of North America, Central America, and South America. And you would have heard me read the statement issued by the OAS General Secretariat earlier.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Das, I know you wanted to ask a question. You're muted.
Hi, good afternoon, good night, everyone. What about India? Is India, what does India have to say about this type of dispute? Thank you.
Anyone can take that question.
Frank, shall I, or would you like me, or would you like to?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, sure. So first of all, India, of course, is yet another one of our friends in the international community, yet another one of our many friends amongst the global family of nations. And India, in fact, is a country with whom we have an active cooperation agenda, including an active cooperation agenda in defense. And I will, again, for obvious reasons, not say more beyond that. And let me once again say that, of course, India is an extremely influential member of the Commonwealth. And so India is associated with the statement from the Commonwealth, which I would have read earlier, and has been consistently associated with the statements made by the Commonwealth over the years. India, of course, is by far the most populous member of the Commonwealth and an extremely influential member of the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Singh. I have a question here for Dr. Anthony. Is there a cross-party committee to deal with this issue?
Well, as Ashni explained, we have been at one on these issues, and we've had the leader of the opposition, the president, has had exchanges. We have shared various platforms talking about this matter. So again, we have been in different venues talking about this together, and we'll continue to do so because this is something that we all are passionate about, and we have to unite to defend our integrity, the territorial integrity of our country.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony. I see Fayez. He has his hands up.
Hi, good afternoon. Reminding ourselves of the attitude of Venezuela regarding this issue, what mechanisms are available to Guyana to ensure that Venezuela recognizes and abide by whatever decision the ICJ dishes out?
Right. Then this one is an open question, unless you want any specific minister to respond to that.
Well, either one, the one that can give us an answer.
Okay.
Well, let me have a shot at it. Let me have a shot at it first, right? And then Frank, of course, can come in and add and augment as necessary. Let me say that in the modern world, certain standards of behavior are expected, and those between and amongst sovereign states. And, there's the rule of international law. There are understandings amongst countries about, like I said, these minimum standards of behavior. And in the modern world, it is certain types of behaviors are simply unacceptable. And I will say to you that if the international community has taken the position that they've taken thus far, and made the statements that they've made thus far, if there were to be, as we expect there will be, a favorable decision or a decision in Guyana's favor by the ICJ, the minimum norms of international behavior would expect respect for the ICJ's decision and adherence to the ICJ's decision and its ultimate ruling. And I would venture so far as to say that I rather suspect that the international community would take a very dim view. I usually use very careful language, and our government, as I'm sure you'll understand, we're very careful about the language that we use in relation to this and other sensitive matters. And so I would say to you that I would venture to suggest to you that I suspect that the international community would take a very dim view of any action in defiance of an ICJ ruling, because an ICJ ruling is expected to be authoritative and to be respected by all parties concerned.
All right.
I will stop there. I don't know if Frank would like to add to that.
I think that's pretty good.
All right. Thank you very much. We've got Mr. James Burke, and then I saw Mr. Peter Ramreka raise his hand, followed by Mr. Tiwari.
Good evening, everyone. This is James from California, so I'm from across the pond. I have a question for Dr. Singh. So in your presentation, Dr. Singh, you characterized the referendum as consultative, and I've heard it also being characterized as non-binding. My question is, those two phrases, does that give our nemesis some wriggle room to not act as, in an aggressive manner, as we expect, the citizenry to vote affirmative on the relevant questions?
Sure. So if I might, thanks a lot. It's James, right? So
yeah.
Thank you very much. Let me just clarify that wasn't my characterization. I was in fact reading verbatim from the statement made by the OAS. And so that wasn't at all my characterization, and I didn't intend either to give or deny any party wiggle room or otherwise. That was a verbatim quote from the OAS statement. I rather suspect that language was used because it was the language used by Venezuela to describe their the resolution that emanated from their National Assembly. I'm fairly sure that that's why the OAS used that language. But that was the language that the Venezuelans may have used in their National Assembly in the process leading up to the resolution to undertake this referendum. So that's not my language at all.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Peter Ramreka.
Thank you, Rosalinda. Good evening, colleagues. Thank you, ministers, for the presentation. I just wondered what the government expects for the diaspora in the UK. What actions do you think would be appropriate and in line with what the government is suggesting that we should be doing? I'm mindful that in situations such as this, one would do a demonstration outside the embassy of the country. The sensitivity which is coming across, would that be wise or not? Thank you.
So let me again. I will have a first stab, and then Frank, you can, if that's okay with you, and I'll defer to Frank, either differing with me or elaborating what I say. So I want to say, first of all, that the Guyanese diaspora has always, I think I said it in my opening remarks, has always played a very important role in matters of national importance. You know, if you go back all the way to the struggle for independence, the diaspora, and in particular the diaspora in the UK, played an extremely important role even in our struggle for independence. And like you said, Peter, quite rightly, on all of the critical issues, there are a number of actions that the diaspora would have taken over the years, whether it is picketing of government offices in the United Kingdom, or picketing of embassies, or writing of letters to local members of parliament. Over the years, the diaspora has played, and like I said, especially the diaspora in the UK, has played an extremely important and influential role on a number of matters of national importance. I would say that at this stage, our main objective is to ensure that the diaspora is well informed on this matter. I am not sure that we are necessarily at the point where we, and again, I would defer to Frank. Frank may very well have a different view on this. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't think we are necessarily at the point where we are asking the diaspora to mobilize and picket any particular embassy or escalate the advocacy on this matter. In this round of consultations, my understanding of our main objective is to ensure that the diaspora is well informed, understands the issue, is able to argue and articulate the issue through your private and bilateral conversations, your interactions on social media, your interactions with your respective contacts within your own private social networks, etc. At this stage, my understanding is that we're seeking, in the first instance, a fully informed diaspora. Subject to Frank expressing a different view or a view that reflects a more current understanding of our objectives, I would say that I'm not sure that we are as yet at the point where we're asking the diaspora to engage in open and public advocacy on this matter. If and when that point arrives, then I'm sure we will come back to you to say, we feel this should be escalated in the main capitals around the world, and this is what we feel you should do, whether it is to write a local MP, or to write your foreign office, or to write or to engage in a public picketing or public activity. If and when we get to that point, we will certainly get back to the diaspora. But right now, we want you to understand this issue thoroughly. We want to appeal to you not to fall prey of the misinformation that is taking place in cyberspace, and to get your information from official sources like the Office of the President and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, their website and their social media presences. That is my understanding of where we are, but I will defer to Frank. Frank, feel free to disagree completely with me and express a more current view if you have one, if you're aware of one.
No, I think that's a perfect answer. And I know that our UK diaspora is quite influential, so I think they can use that influence to sensitize others pertaining to this issue and to make sure that people are well appraised. So that's the only thing I would add.
Thank you very much. We've got Mr. Tiwari, followed by Mr. Clive Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you very much. Greetings from northern Sweden. I have questions, or two questions in parts. And one, if Venezuela's position is backed by any of the former parties who have been involved in these discussions, and why the sudden change, and the like now that they're pursuing. And the second question that has been probably in part already answered by by you panel before. What do you have plans? What might be happening in case that Venezuela is not listening to any court rulings and pursuing with their ruling just because of listening to their inner forces to turn against an external enemy instead of solving their own inner political problems?
So that's a one toss to the floor.
Frank, you want to take that one?
If I get what Mr. Tiwari is asking is what other options do we have? First of all, why the sudden change with Venezuela? It wasn't actually a sudden change because what we saw is that as we were approaching independence, Venezuela started to change its posture. And probably they felt because you wouldn't have the UK at our side, or as an independent country, they can take advantage. And that's when they start upping the ante on this whole issue. But again, when asked to present the evidence of why this sudden change after more than 60-something years of accepting the arbitral award, what they did was to produce a letter or a memoranda from one of the persons, a junior person who was involved as part of the set of lawyers for Venezuela in the 1899 arbitral award. And even that memoranda that they have been talking about, even that memoranda is flawed, because when you go through the contents of the memoranda, some of the things that they have in there, it's not factual. And this memoranda was written by this gentleman 45 years after the award was made. And then he insisted, because this was done in 1944, and then he insisted that it must only be revealed after his death. He died in 1948, and it was revealed in 1949. Not by showing anybody the document, not by publishing it or anything. It was revealed by somebody writing an article in the American Law Journal, quoting from this memoranda. So up to now, and in all the negotiations or all the discussions we've been having with Venezuela from since the 60s, nobody has been able to see the original document. Even when the British went to Venezuela to look at their archives, nobody could see this document that they were advocating and talking about. So a lot of this is based on a dead man's memoranda, which when you go through, even what is written there, it's inaccurate. And that's what they've based a lot of what they've been advocating for, creating this controversy on this memoranda. And that is why I believe that they're reluctant to go through with a court process, because they don't have the evidence to put before a court of law to demonstrate that you can overturn the 1899 arbitral award. So this thing here, from since the 1966, they have been trying to undo this. So it's not an overnight thing. What has changed, I would say, is that this referendum that they're talking about, and that is a change, because previous governments have been maintaining this posture, and of course they published their maps from 1962, putting in the piece of the Essequibo and brainwashing people in Venezuela that this is part of their territory. So this has been going on, and that's why we need the court, the ICJ, to settle this matter once and for all. And we believe we are on the right track, and very soon that is going to happen.
All right. Thank you very much. And now we have Sir Clive Lloyd with your question, please. You're muted, Sir Clive Lloyd. You may want to press the unmute button. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. Good evening, gentlemen. I'm just wondered if the UN is aware of this problem and what role can they play in the future?
Right? And that's open up for any one of the ministers.
So let me have a go. So Sir Clive, good to see you, of course.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Let me just say that, in fact, the UN has been integrally involved in this matter for a very long time. In fact, for nearly 2 decades, the successive UN secretaries general were overseeing what was called a UN good officers process, under which the UN Secretary General was appointing an eminent international citizen to serve as a good officer, endeavoring to achieve a mediated resolution to this matter in accordance with the 1966 Geneva Agreement. And so that process took place over a number of years, like I said, almost 2 decades, and yielded no results. It is in fact as a result of that the UN Secretary General, Frank, I think, mentioned this, that the UN Secretary General in February 2018 stipulated that the appropriate forum for this matter to be heard and resolved would be the International Court of Justice. So Guyana's decision to go to the ICJ was not a decision that Guyana made unilaterally. It was a decision that Guyana made in accordance with guidance obtained from the UN Secretary General, who explicitly said that the appropriate forum for this matter to be resolved is the International Court of Justice. And we then went to the International Court of Justice. So the UN's involvement has been long-standing, and it is Guyana, in fact, who, of the 2 parties, it is Guyana, in fact, we have consistently been guided by the positions taken by the UN Secretary General and in accordance with international law. It is Venezuela who are in defiance of the guidance given by the UN Secretary General when he said that in 2018, it was the current UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who said that the matter should be heard by the ICJ. It is Venezuela, in fact, who is defying the UN Secretary General's guidance in relation to this matter by, in the first instance, indicating that they would not participate in the ICJ's hearings, then participating, and now taking a step to have a preemptive referendum in defiance of the ICJ process. So the short answer is yes, the UN is very much aware and has been involved for several years, including through the good offices process. And we are where we are in the ICJ because of the guidance provided by the UN Secretary General. Frank, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't have the name of the gentleman, but I'm seeing Fowd's iPad ear, if I got that correctly. I'm sorry, I don't have a name.
Hi, Rosalinda. I just have one question for Minister Singh, and that is, since this controversy has reared its head that requires the special measures case currently before the ICJ, I just wanted to know, Minister, if there has been any reduction in the foreign direct investments in Guyana, and possibly because when this matter is resolved on Friday, we still have the substantive matter yet to be determined. How could you give us some idea? What is your feeling as regards the the continued investment in Guyana. And of course, it makes their life more difficult, especially with the budget coming up soon. You know, any shortfall on investments and sale of oil and things like that obviously will affect the general economy. So that's where my area is. That's what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Sure. So thanks a lot, Faoud, for that question, which is, you raise an extremely important point, because of course, any actions to destabilize a country or a region could potentially have an impact on economic confidence and foreign investment, etc. So you're absolutely right to highlight this issue. Let me say the following, though, that investor confidence in Guyana is today at perhaps an all-time high. And I suspect that you know this. And every day, including today, and I mean specifically today, every day, Guyana is receiving trade and investment missions from around the world. This morning, that is this precise day, I'm not using today in a loose manner. This day, today, earlier this morning, or this morning rather, I had the privilege of speaking at a trade and investment mission hosted by no less a person than the British High Commissioner, comprising British companies that have come to Guyana, including a number of large and medium-sized British companies that have come to Guyana looking at investment opportunities and opportunities for trade and opportunities to do business. And that was this morning. Last week, or about 10 days ago, we had the privilege of participating in a trade and investment mission mounted by the European Commission, comprising some of the largest companies from Europe, who came to Guyana looking for investment opportunities and opportunities for trade and opportunities to do business. And so, and I highlight, and those are just two of a long list of a continued stream. Those are just two recent examples of trade and investment missions that have been mounted to Guyana and other visits that we have had from companies who are interested in investing in Guyana. And so the short answer, the short but very definitive answer would be that we have not seen any adverse impact on investor interest in Guyana. Now, I will go further and say the following, that investors, of course, particularly large, sophisticated investors, will do their due diligence. And just like how a number of countries and a number of multilateral and hemispheric institutions have formed an opinion on this matter and have said explicitly that Venezuela is the aggressor here, that this matter was resolved since 1899 and Venezuela has no basis, and Venezuela should subject itself to a peaceful and diplomatic and law-abiding resolution to the matter. In the same manner that countries have arrived at that conclusion and multilateral organizations have issued the pronouncements that they have, I have no doubt in my mind that large companies are also doing their own due diligence. They're also looking into the history and the merits of this matter. They're also looking into the pronouncements that are being made either by their own country or by multilateral and international institutions and organizations that their country belongs to. And they are forming their own conclusion. And I'm happy to say to you that up to today, the conclusion clearly seems to be that Guyana continues to be a stable and an attractive place to do business. And I'm pleased to report to you that companies continue to be interested in doing business to Guyana and continue to come to Guyana to do business. And our intention is to maintain this favorable and attractive environment to do business into perpetuity, into the future.
All right, thank you very much. I'm gonna go to Mr. Dave Singh, who has his hand raised here. Then we have 3 more before we get to we're gonna end off on the questions that are in the chat box, but we're gonna get through all the speakers with raised hand. Mr. Dave Singh, you may proceed with your question, please.
Yes, this is for Mr. Anthony and Minister Singh. I haven't got a question, but I got a point of information. On the 19th of November, we had a meeting in London where Diaspora was invited, and we discussed this very issue. And His Excellency Rajendra Singh was there, and he addressed the meeting along similar lines that you 2 ministers have spoken, but you have given us much more details. So the point I'm making is the education of the UK diaspora has begun and it's ongoing. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Does anybody, oh, there's just a comment there. All right, so let us quickly go to Shondell, then Henry Williams, and I see Fayez with a second question, then we'll go to the chat box.
Hello, good evening.
Good
My
evening.
question is, there are reports of Venezuelans entering Guyana via our shared border. Is that true? And what is in place to determine who are hostile entities embedding themselves in the country and who are financial immigrants?
All right, that's open up for anyone who wants to take it. Dr. Anthony?
Yeah, we do have financial migrants that are coming across, and we have been working with them. You know, at the border, a lot of people are coming over because they need healthcare, for example. And over the, you know, maybe a year or 2, we have been assisting quite a number of Venezuelans who needed that type of care. And in some instances, we had to medevac people from Region 1 to bring them down to Georgetown so that they can get emergency care and things like that. So that kind of humanitarian effort we have been doing. There are lots of kids that are malnourished that are coming over from Venezuela. And we treat them in our hospitals, and, you know, we work with them so that they can get better health. And so this is an ongoing thing. We haven't closed our borders to people who are facing hardships, and we intend to keep it that way. I don't think we have a problem with the people of Venezuela. I think the government has a certain posture, and I hope that whatever madness they have over there in the government, that they can get over it. But we see suffering on the other side on a daily basis. And when they come to us for care or other things, we assist.
All right, thank you very much. So again, in the interest of time, we're going to take the 2 final questions from the floor and then quickly go to the few questions that are remain in the chat box. Mr. Henry Williams, please proceed with your question.
Good evening. I think Shondell must have caught my thought. Just as a follow-on to that one, what are local authorities actually doing to safeguard against the potential of rogue elements? As you may appreciate, things are quite volatile with our neighbors.
All right, Dr. Anthony, you wanna tackle that one there, since you've dealt with it?
I think when people come across, they're screened. So it's for the security forces to make those determinations. You know, with all good intention, you can screen people, but if they have bad intentions, they can hide that too. But so far, we haven't seen that. And I think a lot of the people who come over to us, they genuinely want to work, and they're looking for a better life. Guyana, in this instance, probably we are getting less migrants than other countries that surround Venezuela. It is estimated between 7 and 9 million people would have left Venezuela. So it's quite a lot of people. So we are getting some, but we're not getting, like, you know, loads of people coming over. And we have had also Guyanese who went to Venezuela, was living there, and now they're coming back home. So we have quite a number of those persons too. And they're trying to get reintegrated. But because they left here maybe let's say 30, 40 years ago, that reintegration is challenging, and their family, you know, their kids and so forth, they're having a challenge adjusting. But, you know, they're of Guyanese parentage. And so we have to work with them to see how we can get them into the system, how we can integrate them.
All right, thank you very much. Final person on the floor will be Fayez.
All right, it's two, right? The first one, is there any known or suspected, what should I say, economic or political self-interest amongst countries within the region that will prolong this controversy with regards to the border? And secondly, is there any strategy to inform Venezuelans in Guyana as well as outside of Guyana, Guyana's story about this border dispute, or border controversy?
I think starting with the second one, just recently there was a demonstration in Georgetown in a positive way, where Venezuelans who were living in Georgetown came out and protested these absurd claims by Venezuela. And they were very vocal about it. They spoke about it, and they're not in agreement. So I think that's a positive step. So we've been seeing those types of expressions because, you know, the life that people have been able to come to Guyana and start building, they're quite happy with that, and they want to be integrated here. And they have run away from very awful things that are happening in Venezuela. And therefore, they're willing to stand up and you know, protest against what's going on in Venezuela. And as you know, the conditions there, they have some difficult conditions. You have recently the main opposition person was banned for 15 years from contesting in elections. They're supposed to go to an elections next year. So they have all kinds of challenges within Venezuela. And maybe they're trying to use some of this controversy to detract the people who are living in Venezuela from what is going on in their own country. So there are probably multiple factors at play here, but whatever it is, we come back to one fundamental point. Our border, western border, was settled in 1899. We don't have a dispute. We don't have a controversy. We know where our borders lie. They might have a controversy, but that's their problem.
All right, thank you very much. So what I'm going to do before we end in about 5 minutes, I have some questions quickly. I'm going to group them together for the respective ministers. So Minister Anthony, if you have a pen and paper, you just want to make a quick note of this one here. The first question is, what rights do the Venezuelans have in Guyana, and how long are they allowed to stay? Second question is, Venezuela's flimsy case stems from a letter opened after the death of someone involved in the 1899 arbitration. Was that person one of the arbitrary judges in the 1899 settlement? And the third question for you, does the 1899 agreement cover the maritime area? And to Dr. Singh, the question that is asked here, how does this situation affect our current oil and gas exploration, if at all? Have any of our major stakeholders in the oil and gas expressed any concern? And the second question here is in two parts. If there's a war, is there a financial war chest, as in WAR, war chest? And two, what plans for casualty? Remember Ukraine and Gaza, how sacrosanct are any international borders? That's the question for Minister Ashni Singh. And the final one for Dr. Ashni Singh, how far down the line is the court hearing to put an end to this dispute? And if Venezuela do decide to carry on with their dispute against the court ruling, do we have the backing of the US and UK to stand with Guyana on the military side? So Dr. Anthony, do you want to go with your third question?
That's quite a lot of questions.
Quite a lot. We can do this in 5 minutes. I'm
Maybe
sure.
starting with indeed as I was saying earlier, you had I think his name was Provost, Malet Provost. He was one of the lawyers, a junior lawyer in the Venezuela team. He wasn't an arbitral judge. In fact, the arbitration panel was made up of 5 judges, 2 American Supreme Court judges and 2 from the that was appointed by the Privy Council for the UK. And the 4 of them got together and appointed a 5th judge who was a Russian judge. And he was the president of the arbitral tribunal. So Venezuela, they didn't have one of what they did was to allow the US to put 2 of their Supreme Court judges on the arbitral panel. So Provost wasn't on that panel. And as I said, while they all, and we have statements where they all accepted the 1899 award, and they were very happy with the award. There are statements from Provost, there are statements from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, there are a whole host of Venezuelans, the president and so forth, who agree with the award. And but then suddenly in 1944, after Provost received the highest honor in Venezuela, the Order of Liberator from Venezuela, then we start hearing rumors of this memoranda that start surfacing. And as I said before, to this day, the original copy cannot be made known or shown to anybody. So the case that they've built or they're trying to build is really flimsy, because there's no document to show that there was a conspiracy to rob Venezuela of any territory. That's a figment of their imagination. In terms of the maritime boundary, what was settled between Guyana and Venezuela was our western land border. And I think it was 825 kilometers. But anyway, it was a land border. And it took 5 years for them to get all the points, as was stipulated by the arbitral tribunal. And they were able to do that. Now, there are other international treaty and legislation that defines and demarcate the sea border. And those are what is in effect, what we use to look at our sea border. So you have to start with the land, and then you're able to go outwards to the sea. And so we have been using those conventions.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony. And finally, Dr. Singh.
Sure. Thank you very much. So the first question asked about whether and how the situation is affecting Guyana's oil and gas industry. Let me say that, in fact, the production of oil and gas in the Stabroek Block is continuing uninterrupted. And in fact, those of you who have been following this matter very closely would have noted that in a lot of the ranting and raving by the Venezuelan political leadership, they are attacking, in fact, not only Guyana, but they're also attacking Guyana and the oil companies that are producing oil, and the United States of America. And so their ramblings and their rantings and ravings, in fact, attack a number of parties, Guyana and all parties considered to be friendly to Guyana. But the short answer is that our oil and gas production continues unaffected in the Stabroek Block, and we expect that to continue to be the case. A question was asked about whether there is a war chest and what plans there are in the event that there are casualties, etc. Here again, I'm sure that you would understand why I wouldn't want to venture into speculation about preparedness. We are doing all that we can and all within our capabilities to be ready for every eventuality. But Guyana's firm and unequivocal position is that violent means are not an option, and we eschew those. We find them to be completely unacceptable. And Guyana's position is that we expect a peaceful outcome. Now, I don't want, here again, I think for relatively obvious reasons, I wouldn't want to engage in speculation about preparedness for any sort of violent confrontation, except to say that Guyana is as prepared as we can possibly be for any and all eventualities, including with the support of our international friends. Which takes me smoothly into the third question. The court ruling, I think the question asked how long or how protracted we expect the court deliberations on the substantive matter to be. The reality is that the court will take some time to consider this matter. This matter is not going to go away next week or next month, because this is a matter that the court will hear. The court will have to receive representations from both countries, study those representations, and hand down a decision. So I would say that our position is that, I mean, first of all, I don't want to speak for the court because I'm not in a position to do so. So I couldn't say to you that the court will hand down its final decision until the court announces that it will be handing down its final decision, whenever that will be. But Guyana's position is that we will remain engaged and participating in the court's deliberations until such time as a decision is handed down. And in relation to whether we have the support of the United Kingdom and the United States of America, I think it goes without saying that we have excellent relations rooted very firmly in the history that we share. We have excellent relations with the United States of America and the United Kingdom. We have active agendas for cooperation, including defense cooperation with both of those countries, and indeed with a number of other friendly countries from around the world. But I would hesitate to say anything more than that on this matter at this time.
Thank you very, very much, ministers, for a very informative session. And we're about to close this up. Are there any parting words from Dr. Anthony and Dr. Singh?
Well, thank you very much for having us. I think it was a really good session. And thanks to everyone who asked questions or put something up in the chat. I think it was quite useful to get an idea of what you're thinking, and giving us an opportunity for us to respond. As I said, I think, and Ashley said this too, we want people to remain sensitized, and we want you to use your influence to get other people educated on this matter, and hopefully we can persuade the Venezuelans to go the peaceful route, and the one that the whole world is looking at, which is the judicial process that is in the International Court of Justice. So we want everybody to encourage them to go in that direction and let the court educate on the matter. So once again, I want to thank you, Rosalinda, and the team at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for putting together this webinar and giving us this opportunity to talk to the diaspora.
Thank you so much, Minister. Dr. Singh?
Sure. No, I would just simply like to associate myself with everything that Frank just said. I couldn't possibly say it better. I associate myself with all of his comments. Just thank you very much for organizing this, and to everybody who participated, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, ministers. Thank you, Dr. Anthony, Dr. Singh, for taking time out. I know you are super busy, so we're going to let you go right now. Thank you for doing that. And to the diaspora from the UK and Europe, Thank you very much for being on the call. And in the chat box is our contact details. Please feel free to reach out to the Diaspora if you have further questions and inquiries. We will filter them to the necessary agencies and get those answers back to you. And please make sure, as the minister said, if you have any doubts or anything, look at official sources of information. There was a question asked about being scared about what's going on and all of that. Just don't entertain any of the fake news or the news that will get you psyched up. All right, and we want to thank you again. Reach out to us, and as we end this call here, we're going to keep the chat box open so you can put your contact details, and we'll get that and be in touch with you subsequently. So thank you again. God